Okay, we're live. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us back here for session number 8 of the Overland Roundtable. I am Dan, your moderator for today's discussion, and we do have two new people to the roundtable. But before we introduce Andy and Richard, I want to say hello to Taylor. How are you doing tonight, Taylor?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Doing great. And Jason, finally get you back on after you back some from adventures.
Yeah, hey Dan, how's it going? It's good to see you guys.
Good, good. All right, Richard, we're going to start with your introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the projects that we may recognize you from?
You may know me from such uh, films. No, I currently involved with the Toyota Trucks and Trails podcast, which is just something we're only 15 episodes into, and I'm a certified I4WDTA trainer.
Awesome. Two very good reasons, and those are actually why I invited you on the show because as a certified trainer, I'm sure you're going to bring a lot of relevant information to our discussion on recovery. And also, when we talk recovery, it's hard to ignore the big brand in the space, Warren Industries. So we have Andy Lilienthal. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right, thanks.
Awesome. Well, I gave you the short version of the introduction. Where else may somebody have bumped into you or some of your work?
So, in addition to working at Warren Industries, which I've done for the better part of 10 years, also run a website called Subcompact Culture, which is all about small car stuff. And in addition to that, we do a lot of travel and off-road stuff in our Suzuki Sidekick, which I've spent most of the day working on today. But yeah, so we've gone all over the West and into BC and so on with the Sidekick. We tow a little trailer with it, mostly a fiberglass trailer. And so I've done some stuff for Outdoor by Four, did some stuff for Expedition Portal, and various other places here and there.
Outstanding. All right, well, let's go ahead and kick off the discussion. And since this is a more overland specific show, what are some of and I'm just going to open it up to anybody who wants to jump in here. What are some of the more common stucks and recovery situations that are most likely to find somebody if they are specifically an overlander and not just an off-roader or trail guy? Taylor, you got any thoughts on that? You look like you're thinking pretty hard there.
Buried to the frame in mud or high centered?
Yeah, the buried in the frame in mud is one of those that can easily sneak up on somebody. I know when I was very new to off-roading and off-road travel, I discovered that what looked like a dry road actually had a spring going underneath it, just a couple inches down. So I made it, I don't know, just farther than two lengths of my Jeep, and then instantly sunk all the way to the frame and the bumpers. I had, like, I did not expect it at all. I didn't even lock the front hubs on it, so I was well and truly stuck. So, Andy, what would you do in a situation like that?
Probably just light the car on fire and leave. So if you were buried up to the frame, first of all, the most important thing, you're going to have to identify where you're going to pull to. So if you're lucky enough to have an anchor, you're going to be looking probably to get out pretty easily. If you're traveling with somebody else, they may end up having to be the anchor. And worst case scenario, there's nothing to winch to, and hopefully you either have a land anchor or you can do the old bury the spare tire trick, which will probably take a long, long time to bury that anchor deep enough. So, but in terms of overland stuff, you're not going to get people in the boulders very much. I would say in the overland stuff, I think you're going to get a lot more of those people that are stuck, like you were saying, sort of in the sand or in the mud on a track that they're on. So probably not some of the gnarlier, crazier, super steep rock crawling scenarios, but you can still get plenty stuck. So
That's true. Like I said, it was some pretty thick Texas mud. I was well and truly stuck. And what you mentioned about having something to anchor to was was not available to me. I did not have enough winch cable to reach anything, and unfortunately, I didn't have something like the pole pal. I had actually one of the people I invited to be on the podcast, and kind of it was too little, too late. Was Max from Pole Pal, and what that is a land anchor, and it kind of scissors open, and it's got a spade front end to it, and once you set it in the mud and start pulling a winch cable on it, it buries itself down until it builds up enough tension and resistance that will actually help use the winch for what it's intended. You can pull yourself free. Didn't have one of those at the time, but that would have been extremely helpful. So, but it turned out to be a very long stuck process.
Well,
But
how did you get out, Dan?
well, I was very close to taking the first course of action introduced, just set it on fire and walk away. No, it turned out to be a very long process of calling somebody with a tractor, and after getting the tractor unstuck, we eventually managed to get free. But it was a long process with a lot of tow straps attached to each other. And I don't recommend doing that again. But it was one of those things. It was just totally unexpected. We were just going down what looked to be a dry road, but Texas mud is something special, as I've learned.
And you didn't bring a shovel.
Oh, I had a shovel, but there was no finding the bottom of that mud pit. Like, it only sunk down to the frame because at that point it had built up enough surface tension to not sink any farther. So, like when you step out, you still sunk past that. Like I was in up to my hips, and I was the same thing. Eventually, it came up to my groin, and I built up enough surface tension I wasn't sinking any further.
Yeah, we were at the it was an ATV event called the High Lifter Mud Nationals. It's out in East Texas, out past Tyler, and it was just it was a Can-Am Commander, I believe. Could have been a Kawasaki Terex, that didn't matter. But it was that East Texas clay, and it was so thick. And we had mud boots on, and my buddy just get that suction and ended up getting the vehicle out after a double line pull, but he left the boot there because he couldn't get out of the mud. So.
Yep. Yeah, there was even a cop that pulled into the park because it was now after sunset, which is illegal to be in the park after sunset. I said, check it out. I've been here for 5 hours trying to unscrew this mess. I said, you're welcome to help. And he said, no, I'm just going to stand back here and watch. It's a good thing he was a friend from church. This was one of those small Texas towns, but he was just there to watch the show and watch somebody in misery, I guess. Well, Richard, what is something that you may have tried in that situation, given your schoolhouse education for these things?
It depends on what I brought with me. If I had to resort to stuffing the floor mats under the tires, I certainly would give that a shot. It's fun to drag all your gear out and have these cool recovery scenarios and stuff, but sometimes the simplest thing is the easiest thing, and I often grab a shovel and a few rocks if I can before I want to start pulling cable, if that's the easiest way out. In a situation like you're talking about, though, I mean, yeah, your winch is probably going to come in handy. One of the things I foreteach is the stuck assessment, and it's a way of walking around your vehicle and seeing, what your resistance is, what is your, what, or how badly are you mired? Is the vehicle under its own power? Are the wheels just dangling? Things like that. But making that initial assessment, that walk around and looking at your vehicle and saying, well, I've got a 5,000-pound vehicle, mired in mud that's got heavy suction. And basically, without giving away too much of the fun, we actually have some math we do. And it's in our heads. I mean, we don't sit there on the spot with slide rules and things like that, but we do some math in our head, and basically the way we look at it is we increase the weight of the vehicle depending on what the conditions are. So if it's high centered, I mean, the four of us could probably push a 5,000 vehicle off a certain high center situations. A lot of times you just need a small pull or a little push, but something where it's completely mired, then you're thinking to yourself, is my 9,000, 8,000 pounds winch going to do this? And you have to really just assess the situation and see what you need to do.
Hey, Richard, I want to back up for a second. What is this training that you have? Can you explain that to somebody that may not know what it is?
Okay, so the International Four-Wheel Drive Trainers Association was founded several years ago by a few gentlemen, one of which was Bill Burke, another was Chris Cole, and some other guys, I'm not going to start name dropping, but they started this organization, and it's an international organization, so that people could get trained in both recreational and actually government, which I can, talk about a little bit if you want. But since we're talking recreationally, so that people could get trained, brought up to speed on the tools, the equipment, and the techniques to safely recover vehicles and maintain standards among trainers, so that good, accurate information was being conveyed in a certain way.
Very cool. Good to know. Thank you.
Well, and what you mentioned, some of that math, that's actually really pretty important to know. As somebody's selecting a winch, I think the common understanding is that winch needs to be rated at 1.5 times the vehicle weight. Does that sound right, Andy?
Gross vehicle weight.
Gross vehicle weight.
Mm-hmm.
So really, you're talking, for most Jeep JK Wranglers now, the 4 doors, that's a pretty heavy vehicle, and I think the common thing that people go to is just go straight to like a 9,000 pound winch, but odds are that's not enough. I don't know what a JKU weighs right off the top of my head, but I think it's close to at least 6,000 pounds. They're pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's got I believe the JKU's gross vehicle weight rating is 5,500 pounds. That could be for the 2-door though. And I'm not 100% sure on that. I just looked it up the other day. But on a JKU, I would probably say 9,000 is a good starting point. 10,000 if you're going to be loaded down with bumpers and racks and 37s and all this stuff. But the other thing that people don't think about, a lot of times people think, well, if 9,000 is good, then 10,000 is better. Well, 12,000 is great. Well, why not 17,000 pounds? And you could actually damage the vehicle by putting too big a winch on there. I mean, if you put a 16.5, 16,500 pound capacity winch on a JK, you do run the risk of potentially damaging something. That includes possibly frame stuff, even the bumper, because it's probably not rated to pull. The frame isn't rated to pull that much. I know people that have, especially like Suzukis and stuff like that. You put a 12,000 pound Suzuki on the thing, you might fold it in half. So.
You mean that's not the best way to turn a JK into a JKU? Is just put the heavy winch on it and stretch it out?
It's a way.
Another thing we see too is the newer vehicles versus older vehicles. Newer vehicles have crumple zones in the frame. They're designed for collisions. Well, crumple zones work in the opposite direction and can be a weak point with too strong of a winch.
Wow, yeah, that is really something to think about. I haven't seen somebody uncrumple, but I have seen some bad winch mounts peel a bumper off the front end or the back end off somebody else's.
So, one of the things we talked about, I taught a winching class at the Northwest Overland Rally, and one thing we talked about was if you're buying a used vehicle, especially, and if it maybe came with a winch bumper that was homemade or something, make sure that when you do say put a winch on that you make sure that that's attached to well. If it's a car from the East Coast, make sure that there's not a ton of rust. Make sure that there's not that rust isn't penetrating through the frame rails or through the winch bumper, because you could end up in a pretty bad scenario if it was.
That's a very, very good point. You don't want to pull rusty bumper off and give your buddy tetanus from slashing him open with a rusty bumper flying through the air.
At a minimum, yeah.
Yeah, because the bleeding, that's no big deal. But that tetanus, that'll get you.
The one that's gonna hit you. Well, okay. So another thing we talk about is the position of a winch, because oftentimes, like as I sunk into the mud, I cut some pretty deep furrows behind me, but the recovery operation went out the front. So going farther forward, you mean I pulled for a long time through some really thick mud in that situations where I probably would have had a better time pulling out the rear. But who puts their winch on the rear bumper? Like,
Some people.
They're out there. They're out there.
well, and I've seen some of these smarter folks that actually have the same winch on a kind of a mount that you can use when you need it, and when you don't, just load it in the back somewhere. Mounts in a trailer hitch on the front or the back.
Yeah, we offer a product at Warren called the multi-mount, and that allows you to go ahead and put a winch up to 10,000 pounds of capacity on there, move it front to back. I mean, it's not light. It's going to weigh about 100, 115 pounds, but it's a good option for some people. And of course there are people that do have winches front and rear, just for that kind of situation. So
I could see that being a good option for somebody that daily drives their rig and doesn't want the added weight of a winch on their vehicle when they're driving back and forth to work every day.
Absolutely.
Well, yes, we had on this trip that we just did, we had a camper van with us, an E350 conversion camper van, and he had a winch mounted to the front and the back of that. And you're talking about a 10,000-pound vehicle, so his philosophy was that if I'm going to need a winch to pull myself through something, I'm probably going to want to pull myself backwards through it because I don't know what's going to be ahead of me, based on pulling through mud or pulling up a hill versus pulling back out, because it is such a heavy vehicle, and he doesn't have 20,000-pound winches on this rig, so he calculates what the load's going to be based on his recovery situation, and then chooses to winch off the front or the back.
That's pretty smart. Another challenge that I know is probably coming to meet a lot of people is a recovery situation with a trailer. I fortunately have not had to deal with that situation. I've been fortunate that once I've decided I don't want to go forward anymore, I could manage to back up with my trailer, which is a huge challenge down a very tight trail. I can only imagine what the challenge would be like if I actually got stuck and had to pull out in reverse. That would definitely be a disconnect the trailer and manage that as two separate recovery operations at that point. But has anybody had any experience with that?
I can just tell you the summary of that is you're gonna end up disconnecting the trailer, possibly unloading it, and it's not fun. It depends on the trailer. If it's your average little M416 trailer that a lot of people are dragging around, it's not so bad if you got a couple friends with you. I'm a big advocate of not going anywhere alone. So that gives you some more options for pulling backwards or getting a hand with a trailer. But trying to pull the vehicle and the trailer when the vehicle's mired you may be setting yourself up for a rough situation.
I believe that. Best thing to do in that case is probably just avoid getting stuck altogether, but that just doesn't happen.
What fun is that?
I know. Well, and this is kind of funny. Jason, do you guys have a trailer set up now for Mountain State Overland?
No, we don't. Some of the roads and stuff that we traveled through Maine, would have, accompanied a trailer just fine. I think even some of the trails in New Hampshire would have accompanied a trailer fine as well. And some of the trails that we traveled in New Hampshire are part of an Overland Challenge series that Exploring NH puts together. And although I would have not wanted to take and pull a trailer down some of these trails that we navigated and went through, I have seen images of lifted Jeeps pulling trailers and executing navigation of those trails very well. So no, we actually don't have a trailer system right now.
Okay. Well, I know, Andy, you've got a trailer, but your trailer, you probably just pick it up and move it with one hand.
Pretty much, yeah. Mine's really lightweight, and generally, we haven't had any issues getting stuck with the trailer. When we went to Moab, we actually dropped the trailer at our camp spot and just went out exploring for the day. So, but yeah, I haven't had any experience with that, getting stuck. I've been with people on trails and had them, and we've been pretty lucky without having an issue.
Very cool. Well, let's back up and talk about. We've talked about the winch, but there's quite a few other tools that somebody may want to use if a recovery situation presents itself. So, Jason, what are some of the tools that Mountain State Overland carries?
So we've got kind of a shovel is definitely the first and most important option. So many times that we've been places and needed to move some ground or something like that, or kind of mitigate the risks and stuff. A shovel is very helpful. Traction solutions like Max Tracks. So we've got sets of Max Tracks that we use and try to deploy to whether it's to help us navigate rocky terrain, or to help us to recover from something that we can kind of zip right out of real quick. But Max Tracks don't work in every situation, and so we've got winches as well. We've got Warren Xeon winches on both of our rigs, and we've used those for recovering and for stabilizing the vehicle in precarious situations where we're at a high tipping point and we want to stabilize the vehicle from the back or the front as we're kind of navigating down through the trail. So snatch straps, you can see lots of images of people using snatch straps in long pull situations where somebody's on some dry ground. We haven't been ever in a fortunate situation where we've been able to kind of deploy a snatch strap for recovery. And then just
when you're talking about a snatch strap, are you talking about like a kinetic recovery rope or just like a tow strap?
So a kinetic recovery rope.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of the newer vehicles have all sorts of different traction control systems too. So like we were talking about, kind of getting out and assessing the situation and knowing your vehicle and knowing how it operates, you can attempt a couple different options first. So our first kind of go at it is to assess the situation and try to use some of the traction control solutions on the vehicle, and then kind of make decisions. And it's having several tools on hand, based on the time that you have on the trail, based on how how quickly you want to get out of a situation, or how you want to use your equipment, so that you're training yourself and that you know how to use that when you do need to use those different options is a great idea. So just having various different options for recovery is very important, I think.
Okay, let's real quickly talk about the difference between a snatch strap and a tow strap. Can one of you guys elaborate on that?
A snatch strap is going to have elasticity to it. A snatch strap is going to provide that kind of rubber band effect, where you have, if you take a rubber band and you stretch it, and it's going to pull the other object towards it like that. Whereas a tow strap is going to be rigid. It's more for towing, or a tree strap. It's not something that's going to have an elasticity to it. So you don't generally want to use you never want to use a kinetic strap for towing, for instance, because of that stretch.
Okay, that was one thing I wanted you to say, is don't use your snatch strap for towing, and don't use your tow strap for snatching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to rip things off of a vehicle. So
or break your back window.
Or both.
yeah.
Get hit in the teeth with a tow ball.
There's so many videos on YouTube of somebody using a tow strap as a snatch strap, and it ends up with, like Taylor said, that tow ball coming straight through a windshield, or somebody's bumper getting peeled off. Usually this is around the beach too, I've noticed. So there's a lot of water involved and impending doom from rising tides. Always a good time.
Okay,
Yeah,
that brings up another good point. I saw on a Facebook post the other day some guys talking about some recovery stuff, and I can't remember who said it, but they said when you get stuck, don't panic, don't rush into the recovery, stop and make tea.
Yep, that was Chris, the Black Wagon on Twitter and Instagram, and I think that is I think that's the Camel Trophy way of doing things. Just stop, relax, and think about it first, because oftentimes you're going to make bad decisions if you don't think about it first. So.
Yeah,
Unless your vehicle's submerged.
Yeah, that's a little bit different.
that's the tea thing must be going around recently, because I know that last year at the Northwest Overland Rally, we had some of the trainers and whatnot saying, when the Camel Trophy guys get stuck, the first thing they do is say, okay, someone put a tea kettle on and let's figure out how to get out of this. So, and it's a good thing, because it really, you got to slow down. Everybody's so keen to quickly jump on this and just get the heck out. You got to really do assess the situation and see what is going to work. Do you need a winch? Do you need a snatch strap? Are max tracks or sand ladders going to work for you? So.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would kind of add too, not necessarily that you have to rush, but I think having your vehicle prepared for a recovery situation. If you're going to be traveling through water crossings or traveling through some precarious terrain and stuff like that, having your snap straps or your recovery straps or your wrench remotes ready and stuff like that, so that they're easy to access, or having your straps on your front bumper or hooked to your anchor points already, so that if you can't get out of your vehicle, I have been in that situation where I can't get out of my vehicle and I'm trying to explain to somebody where my stuff is. And usually we carry some universal equipment, so just having your vehicle ready for those situations. If you're going to be traveling down the interstate for 100 miles, you don't need your recovery straps and stuff like that, hanging off of your vehicle, but just being prepared so that you can deploy if you don't have time to fix up a kettle of tea, so to speak.
That is one of the things that kills me whenever I see somebody driving down the highway with the recovery strap already attached, and it's been getting blasted by UV rays in the sunlight for months, getting rocks and sand rubbed into it. It's just, by the time he actually needs to use that tow strap, somebody's going to get their eye poked out.
Yeah, and that brings up another good tip as well. With your snatch straps, after you use them, if you've been using them in the mud, it's a good idea to clean them. Clean them well so they don't, like Dan just said, break next time you go to use them. And make sure they're dry before you put them away so they don't get moldy and nasty.
Also an equally bad thing.
Abrasion is the big killer on synthetic stuff, and even washing it's a catch-22. You can not wash it and let the dirt work its way into the fibers, or you can wash it and help the dirt get into the fibers. So, but this really comes down to keep an eye on your equipment, take care of it. I wash my stuff, so I'm not telling anyone not to. But you do have to kind of use your head and inspect your equipment, and maybe after it's soaked in 50 or 60 mud puddles, maybe it's time to think about a new strap or rope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good point. Cleaning and taking care of your equipment, Taylor. Climbing. When I used to climb when I was younger, it was voodoo. It was forbidden to actually ever step on your rope, and you were always cognizant of where that rope was, so that you weren't getting it dirty or you were taking care of it, because that was your lifeline. So That being said, I mean, Andy, could you elaborate on synthetic versus cable, for winching options? And we're talking about, Richard brought up abrasion too, so there might be some good key points to speak on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that question, synthetic versus steel, is probably the #1 question we get. Last 2 shows I've been to, by far. So both have their advantages, both have their disadvantages for sure. Right now, we sell the majority of our products with synthetic rope. Synthetic rope is very popular nowadays. There's a lot of concern about safety and synthetic rope, and there's a sort of an idea or a belief that wire rope is super dangerous. And I think a lot of that comes from the logging world, where you heard horror stories and stuff like that. But here's the deal. So synthetic is lightweight and easy to handle. You can pick it up, move it around. It's very easy to work with. Wire rope is extremely durable and extremely forgiving. So the cons, however, are synthetic is UV susceptible, so you do have to replace it at some point. It's also easier to it's more prone to abrasion, like we were just talking about. And so you do have to be careful. Like if you're winching over an apex, right? You're coming up and you have to winch over a rock or a log or something like that. You want to make sure you have a sliding sleeve down so you don't start to abrade the rope. Of course, the downsides with wire are they do develop burrs and little things that can cut up your hands easier than synthetic rope, and it is heavier. It does store more potential energy than a synthetic rope. So I have people tell me all the time that, oh, I'd never run synthetic rope. I never run wire rope. It's too dangerous. Well, I've witnessed both wire and synthetic rope snap, both in the field and not, and in controlled environments. And when synthetic snaps, it does drop to the ground, but as long as you should be using a winch damper on that line, no matter if it's synthetic or metal anyway. So when synthetic does snap, it does fall to the ground with a winch damper on there, and then it comes rocketing back at you. Well, granted, it's along the ground, so you still have to be really careful with it. Any winch line you have to be really careful with. And the wire rope, again, as long as you've got something on that line, you should be in a much more safe scenario than if you don't. So if you're doing a lot of winching in situations where there's lots of rocks, lots of logs, you're running the line over those things, steel is still a great choice. And if you're going to do that with synthetic, you just got to be more careful.
Yeah, I have found that just in the last, really, it's been probably the last 5 or 6 years that the synthetic line has really kind of taken off. I think a lot of people have built up a false sense of security. What they think is that when it does break, that it does just drop to the ground. But you're right, Andy. It does still store some potential energy, and it's going to be moving, and you don't want to be standing right up on it. So all the same, proper safety practices apply, whether you're using a steel cable or a synthetic rope. If you're standing right there next to it, whereas if it snaps, it's going to swing right back to you, you're in the dead man zone. So you need to stand clear of those kinds of things. And all the same rules still apply for recovery safety. So.
Absolutely.
Well, we've dominated the discussion all about my mishaps, but I want to open this up, let somebody else share some of their misery. So I'm not the only one here. Like I said, misery loves company. So. Jason, I'll start with you. I'm sure you've had some sketchy recovery situations come up.
So yeah, we've had some usually our recovery situations we've had quick recoveries, we've had traction recoveries, we've had high center recoveries, sitting on the pumpkin or sitting on a skid plate or sitting on the frame, I think some of the more interesting recovery situations have been those, stabilizing the vehicles, working with pulley systems, off the front and the back of the vehicle on a very tight trail, off camber, where there's no option to go downhill. So those, those types of situations definitely warrant, stepping back and taking your time and assessing the situation and knowing your limitations, whether you decide to, turn around, or continue forward, not knowing what's ahead. So, yeah, I do. I mean, like I spoke earlier, I do like to, without any particular recovery situation to talk about, I do like to use all of my equipment. When everybody wants to go for the winch right away, I like to refer to the winch as knowing that that is going to be what's going to recover me. And I would like to work through my options leading up into that point, so that I always have that plan, C, that dependable plan C to rely on. So in those situations where we are stabilizing a vehicle or something like that, of course we're going, straight for the winches. But we've used, one recovery situation I could think about was about a year and a half ago. We deployed traction solutions to keep us on the trail. We had the winch off the front of the vehicle to a tree. We had a winch off of a vehicle to the back of this vehicle that was being recovered and winched up off of a pulley off the hillside. So as we were, moving the vehicle forward, we were releasing, the winch from the vehicle behind, and then the traction solutions were, kind of keeping us on trail, so that we felt very comfortable in the situation, and we had all of our bases covered, and we were using a shovel at the same point. So, that's there's a reason why you carry all of that stuff. With overland travel, I think the biggest thing is that we're not traveling with, vehicles that are lifted up, 6 inches, and lots of people have 35s, and some people have bigger tires and stuff. But we don't get too crazy with our overland vehicles because we use them for our daily drivers, and we spend a lot of time on gravel roads or secondary roads and stuff like that. So we want something that can travel, comfortably, and these vehicles are usually heavy vehicles. They're not a lightweight trail rig. So I think with as excited as we are to get out on trails and stuff, I think we could face even more recovery type of situations, because these are not rock crawl ready vehicles, and we're typically not doing that stuff. But if we come up to that obstacle, we need every bit of these recovery options, on board. So.
Exactly. All right, Richard. I'm sure you've had some stories, maybe even classroom situations, but most likely, let's hear a real world story where you've been stuck.
Me personally, or I, all my stucks have been pretty tame, but I've definitely been right there when some sketchy stuff happened.
It's funny, one of my first memories of working with you was at the Vermont Overland Trophy, and somebody using a high lift jack to change a tire on a very precariously positioned Land Rover. And that was all I remember is Richard coming in, stand back, everybody, hold on, this may not be a good idea. All I could envision was that handle coming up and busting somebody's jaw.
Yeah. Actually, we had some candidate trainers a couple of weeks ago that were working with a high lift, and one of the candidates managed to zonk himself upside the head with a high lift. So that certainly is a little more common. But one of the sketchiest situations I had the displeasure of attending was a vehicle that had an automatic transmission going up a hill. It was a Toyota, by the way. We can say it was a Suzuki, if that's better. But was going up a hill. He had no parking brakes and had a transmission failure almost up at the top of the hill, and so. His brakes worked, but we had to very carefully get him back down the hill, and it involved, using the winch basically to lower it back down on really rough terrain. and it was off camber, and we were, tying it off. One of the great bits of gear you can bring with you is a piece of rope, because sometimes just tying off a vehicle, while your winch brake is pretty good, but in certain situations you probably don't want to count on it, or you may need the winch, so you can't really occupy it with stabilizing a vehicle. And I believe it was it Taylor, or I sorry, I forgot who brought it up, but stabilizing the vehicle, it's cool to get out and make tea, but before then, is the vehicle stable? Is the vehicle in a situation where we can walk away from it for a second to make some tea or something? And off camber hill situations, sometimes you do have to think on your feet and figure out how you're going to stabilize it, either from a rollover or from a rollback situation. You want to look out for those kind of things. So yeah, a length of rope is great to throw in there. It doesn't weigh much, and can really come in handy. As can the infamous block of wood. A 4x4 or a 6x6 can really come in handy for various things. Another thing too is if you do have rope and you know how to tie a daisy chain, which is a great knot to, people can Google that or look that up, how to tie a daisy chain, and use it with a piece of hardwood. You can cut up you can buy a new shovel handle and cut it up into several sticks of wood and use that for daisy chains. Different techniques you can use to secure a vehicle and lower it with a rope, even if you have to. Just being able to know a few knots and how to work with that rope can be super handy. Actually, I wanted to cut in before and mention some trailer failures when we were dragging trailers through up through Maine. We had a trailer that flopped over on one side and had to be righted, and that got into some interesting stuff. If you are bringing a trailer, a high lift, winching with a high lift is kind of miserable. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done it. If you have, yes, you can winch with a high lift, but if you don't have a 60-inch bar, you're going to be there a while. So sometimes just the come along is actually something you can throw in your trailer and bring with you. It doesn't weigh a heck of a lot. I mean, if you've already got the high lift, that's cool and all. But just as an alternative, righting your trailer after it's flopped over. So this guy was my friend Greg, actually. It's not just some guy, but he was towing this enormous Dodge Power Wagon military repair trailer. The thing looks like a pig smoker. I wouldn't be surprised. It does. We call it the pig smoker. It looks like that. He had flopped it over on one side, getting through an obstacle, and not far down the trail, flopped it on the other side, completely destroyed his rooftop tent and whatnot. But getting those, that was a big heavy trailer, getting them righted, having a trailer flop is not uncommon, and getting them back on their feet again, is especially without damaging things like rooftop tents and things on it, can be a bit of a challenge. So, when people are building trailers and things, they don't think that, the trailer can go on its side. Well, there's nowhere to attach anything to on it. They can be really difficult to get back over.
That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Well, Taylor, let's hear maybe a hypothetical story. This guy I know got stuck real bad.
Man, I really do not have any bad stuck stories. The only real horror story I have is a high lift story, so I don't think that really applies here all that well.
All right. Don't want to own up to it. I got you.
Yeah, not really.
Well, okay. Well, and I know I've seen some of the pictures of you leading some of those recovery training situations, and one that I think probably everybody that's ever used the internet before has seen is the one with Teal Terror with the timbers tied underneath it. At first glance, it's hard to figure out what exactly is going on here.
Yeah, I got lots of questions about that one. Again, Northwest Overland Rally. Ray Hyland was talking about a theoretical situation you could get yourself into, which is where you're using two logs as a bridge. And so you're crossing a ravine or a creek or something like that on a log bridge. And so as a fail-safe, if you will, or a backup, I guess, what you can do is you can take a couple of straps and go over the top of the vehicle, and then you take logs and you run them underneath the vehicle so that they are basically across the width of the vehicle. So they have to be big enough that it would support most of the weight, but it have to be small enough that you can move them around and suspend them from the front and the rear of the vehicle. So basically, they hung two logs, trees, from the front, basically the hood area, and the back of my Suzuki, which, no, it doesn't weigh a lot, but it still weighs 3,000 pounds. And so, and then they had me purposely drive off the log bridge. So, and it did hold. So, it's a neat trick, you know, and it was one of those rainforest challenge kind of situations, you know, where you're in Indonesia or somewhere that's, you know, got lots of logs and wet and all this, and yeah, it's a neat thing. I'll tell you, one of the gnarliest recoveries that I had seen was when we were in Moab back in 2008, and a gentleman went into one of the hot tubs. And for those of you that aren't familiar with hot tubs, they are big depressions in the slick rock, some of which are 6, 8, 10 feet deep, and they're very narrow. So getting down into them is one thing, and then getting out is another. And this guy, the video is on YouTube. He had a very, very nice Jeep, and there were some offers of having him stabilize the front end, and he didn't want to do it. And on about the third or fourth try, he went pedal to the metal and flopped it upside down in about a foot of water, oil, antifreeze, you name it, at the bottom of this hot tub. And then it started snowing, which was fantastic. But it took like 5, 6 winches to right this vehicle because it was upside down in a very narrow spot. Luckily, he was okay. He lost his cell phone, lost his keys to his RV, and all this stuff. But it was quite a scenario to get him out of this small area. And, you know, there were side pulls, there was, you know, pulls from the front, pulls from the rear, stabilizing winches, all this. It was gnarly. It was bad.
That's pretty crazy. And I've heard of those rollovers in the hot tubs. And you're right. I mean, once you're belly up down there, it's kind of a challenge to get somebody flipped back over when they're at the bottom of a hole, not just kind of stuck on the edge of a trail. Yeah,
you got it. It's one thing if it's a rock buggy that are kind of not designed to go over, but, you know, they have the roll cage and they have, you know, provisions for that, I guess. You know, a lot of times 4 or 5-point harnesses. This was a trail wrangler, you know, and it was he used it, don't get me wrong, but it was a good looking vehicle. It wasn't just a battle wagon. So.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate. But so as we go and wrap up the show, I'm going to go ahead and go fishing for some feedback from some of the audience. I'd love to hear someone's story of recovery. They can either email it to us at overlandroundtable@gmail.com, or you can use the 4x4 podcast voicemail line. Just 719-924-5337 is a good way to send in that voicemail yourself, and we can play that on an upcoming show. So as we close out, I want to give everybody a chance to kind of pimp out some of the projects that they're working on. And since I've got an order displayed here on front of me on the Hangout, we'll just go down from left to right. We'll start with Andy, then Jason, Richard, and Taylor lastly. So Andy, where can somebody go to follow all of the things that you're working on?
So, of course, Warn.com is going to have all of our products that we offer on that side of the business. Of course, Facebook.com/WarnFans. We're on Instagram at Warn Industries, Twitter at Warn Industries, YouTube at www.warn.com. But you can find us just by searching. So we've got some great new products. We've got our Epic line of accessories, which are the latest, greatest. We've got our Xeon Platinum winches, which are all controlled by a wireless remote that is advanced, and it's even got remote clutch now. There's no clutch handle. So all kinds of things there. On my personal side, subcompactculture.com, you can see our travels throughout the West. You can read about our trip to the Northwest Overland Rally. It was written by my wife, Mercedes. You can see our trip to Overland Expo, and all over the place. So, and then going through some car things right now. So there's might be some changes up on the horizon. So.
Yeah, a little too soon to talk about the future of Teal Terror. I saw that today. That's sad.
That bad keyway on the crankshaft today. I just found that out. It's pretty bad. So.
Bummer. All right, Jason, where can somebody follow all your adventures?
You can land on everything Mountain State Overland at mountainstateoverland.com. You can find us on social media at MS Overland, and we just got back from filming our productions for season 3, and we'll be rolling out that full season here in August, and it'll be releasing every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So really excited about sharing some images and some stories from New England, Maine, and New Hampshire, and everything that goes on there and in between. And we'll also be traveling to several events here this fall and late summer. So if you're at Mid-Atlantic Overland Rally, Overland Festival, you're at Overland Expo East, you're at Vermont Overland Rally, even some local events here in Roanoke, and we should be up at OK for Wheel Drive for Truck Fest as well too. So yeah, stop in, say hi, and check us out on YouTube as well, Mountain State Overland.
Right on. All right, Richard, where can we go to find you and all of your antics?
Boy, there's not just one place, so but I'll try and be tame. Primarily, I'm hanging out at Toyota Trucks and Trails Podcast, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/TTAT Podcast. And we also have our website at toyotatrucksandtrails.com. You can learn more about the International Four-Wheel Drive Trainers Association at i4wdta.org, and find trainers in your area and see what we're up to and what kind of events are going on. I'll also be at some of the events. I believe Jason is going to be at Vermont Overland Rally. We're doing New Hampshire Overland Challenge for the 2nd year in a row, and of course we just finished up our 3rd year in Maine. So next year again we'll be at the Maine Moose on the Loose event that Northeast Overland puts on, and we're also the podcast is covering exclusively the Appalachian Toyota Roundup this year down at Windrock Park in Tennessee. So I'm sure we'll probably run into a bunch of people there too.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm looking forward to hearing all of that, and you're doing great work with the podcast. I love listening to Toyota Trucks and Trails podcast.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's your fault. You started this.
I know, and I wish I could be more involved. However, turns out this Overland Roundtable and the 4x4 podcast keep me pretty busy. So
rightly so.
You and Jason together up and help make that happen.
Yeah, 2 old Toyota guys. I mean, look what you did. It's like car talk for Toyotas.
Exactly. All right, Taylor, another Toyota fan. Where can we find everything that you've been doing?
As always, the Overland Adventures. You can find us Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and the overlandadventures.net. And also Overland Textile Company. Same thing, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and overlandtextile.com. The site has not launched yet, but it should here in the next couple weeks.
Very cool. I see right there behind your head looks to be some Overland Textile Company inventory. So I'm looking forward to seeing everything that you have ready to offer there.
Thanks.
Awesome. And I am your moderator, Dan Cole, and host of the 4x4 podcast. You can subscribe there in iTunes. Just do a search for the 4x4 podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I think that's it for the social networks. Google Plus. However, I'm not on there very often. We just use it for the hangout here. But doing lots of cool stuff. Primarily right now headquartered in Alaska, so there's some great stuff. And I've been doing a lot of fishing and using my four-wheel drive vehicle to get out there for some fishing and exploring, especially in the Denali National Park and Denali Highway area. So it's a lot of really cool stuff. Some really legendary, iconic places that are here in North America. So that is it for now. This has been session number 8 of the Overland Roundtable. Love to have you join us back for session number 9, where I'm going to go ahead and use some executive power here. We're going to talk some Overland cooking stuff. So bring your A game to the outdoor kitchen, and we'll discuss some recipes come next time on the Overland Roundtable. We'll talk to you later.